Hi everybody, my name is Valeria Camerino and I'm the editor of Security Advisor on Middle East. I have with me Naki Mirza, Regional Director Middle East from Mimecast, and Greg Day, Director of EMEA Security Strategy at McAfee. Today we will talk about email compliance and why it's so important for every business. Right. First of all, we usually, think of email as a traditional, as a casual way of communicating. How can we change our mindset?
Well, I think the reality is email now is for most seen as the most predominant method of communication for two simple reasons. One is I can communicate with multiple people at the same time, and that gives us a quicker route to get things done.
Right.
I think the second is it gives us a route of accountability.
Yeah.
So, if I call you and ask you to do something, there's no record that I passed the problem on to you, whereas with email, there's that permanent record that it's now your problem to deal with.
Right, I see. So, what are the key elements of a corporate email compliance policy?
The key elements could vary from industry to industry. So corporate email policy for a financial institution could be different from a manufacturing firm. What's important to bear in mind is when designing a corporate email policy is life cycle of an email. So we create an email, we send that email to somebody, and we need to keep that email for X number of years. So in a nutshell, you're looking at security of that email, so how you scan emails coming in and going out, how do you make email always available, and how do you store those emails that form the basis of a corporate email strategy.
Right, so talking about that, do you think that the cloud computing will change the way we use and store data and move, obviously, emails?
Absolutely, and I think if you look at it, we did some research a couple of years ago around data breach. So one of the challenges today is we often look and think the threat is coming into our organizations. So we set policies around controlling what comes in.
Right.
But we have to think now just as much about what goes out. And what we found was, whilst many people may send confidential information out through corporate email, a smaller, more specific subset then say, well, how do I circumnavigate those controls I expect to be in place? So we found about 25% would use things like webmail clients,
right,
or maybe Web 2.0 tools, instant messenger tools that give that same kind of functionality, but aren't going through that, if you like, preferred business route of communication.
Right. So what are the biggest security threats that companies need to take into account?
I would say today the number one challenge for most organizations is more about controlling what information goes out,
right,
making sure their customer information, their intellectual property is contained and controlled. However, we still see email as one of the most predominant methods of compromise attack. So about 80 to 95% of all email is spam, is junk. That's
right,
just wasting and abusing bandwidth.
Okay.
And can lead to challenges with HR and corporate policy. But then within all of that junk that we see, very often we'll see malware attacks and other nefarious attacks as that route of getting customers to click on something, download something that leads to then information leaving the business.
Okay, I see. So what can we do about that in terms of what, we see that the Middle East, compared to compared to Western countries and in particular Europe and the US, it's still in a way at an early stage in terms of compliance. So how can we change that? What are the, in terms of strategy? What would you suggest to do in terms of to improve this situation?
Sure. 85% of corporate communication or corporate intellectual property is held within email. And I think mindsets have changed in the West through lead from government organizations or government directives, legal frameworks that require you to be compliant with certain laws and regulations around email. So I think the governments here are also going to have to take a lead in terms of defining those frameworks, defining those policies, and how we go about adhering to those requirements. To give you an example, a firm in the US recently was fined about $700,000 by FINRA for not being able to reproduce certain key electronic information that was held within email.
Right.
So $700,000 is a substantial fine, and I think because there was a law around that was.
So in a way, law enforcement would help. Anyway, you think that the government would play a major role.
I think the governments have to take a lead. Secondly, I think by the nature of the Middle East, a lot of companies that exist here inherently deal with international organizations, either through having branch offices or customers or suppliers in other parts of the world.
Right.
So there's already an overlap in terms of meeting compliance requirements. We see a lot of organizations in the Middle East that are compliant with Sarbanes-Oxley or Basel because of them dealing with international operations. So it's changing, the mindsets are changing very quickly, and I think the governments will have to take a more proactive lead in defining that.
Maybe if we move that down into kind of the practical layer, I think the first challenge for every organization is what kind of tools are being used to communicate. Is it traditional corporate email? Is it people using their own personal email accounts, webmail accounts? Is it other social networking tools? So we have to understand the scope of that communication. What actually are they using, both officially and unofficially in our organizations? Then we have to start to figure out, do we allow it? And then how do we do it safely? So if we don't allow it, how do we monitor, control and block it? If we do allow it, then we have to start to link together now so many different technologies, from things like spam filtering that needs real-time updating of the problem, through to malware. We see over 55,000 new threats created every single day, through to content control. Where should I be allowed to go? What should I be able to do? And in fact, the big challenge for many organizations is there are so many different components. What we're now seeing is consolidation. How do I bring this together, simplify it down into something that is logistically manageable?
Okay.
So actually what we're seeing is, as the scope of how we use technology and what we do with it grows, we have to rethink how we define our policies in something that is manageable and achievable on a day-to-day basis.
So could you expand a bit on this? What kind of tools have you seen recently in the market that could help to achieve this goal?
Well, I think the cloud itself is one tool. So how do we make use of the global internet to give us faster and better intelligence as to what the problem is? And do I maybe outsource some of those bits of functionality, the things that are quite laborious and repetitive, to a cloud service? I hand over that responsibility. Now, the challenge for most is I'm not going to hand over everything. So, for example, I might hand over dealing with spam and antivirus, but controlling my confidential data, well, no one else knows what's confidential. So I've got to keep that in-house. So what we start to need is this kind of hybrid model that says, the simple repetitive work, let me give that to somebody else to do, and that frees up my skill, my expertise, my resource to focus where they're most valuable. For example, maybe keeping data safe. The challenge is, how do I bring that all together into one, if you like, common point of visibility? Because I still want to understand and feel safe while somebody's doing the cloud bit. I need that visibility and marry that with the bits that I still control.
Right. So is there anything you would like to add on this particular topic?
Absolutely. As Greg said, email is the lifeblood of an organization today, and the complexity behind it involves multiple systems that deal with security, that deal with archiving, that deal with availability of email. So what businesses need to realize is what can they outsource and what they can come into the office and expect to work as electricity, and what they still need to maintain in-house, which might be confidential, which might be key to their organization. So it's the hybrid approach, I think, that the cloud is introducing that will change the way people and companies manage their email.
So to what extent smartphone usage can, basically will change the email landscape?
Massively, and I think it already is. So I've seen a number of organizations around the globe that have done everything from, say, we're going to go buy 5,000 iPads for a specific purpose, through to this term consumerization,
right,
which is, typically, what did I get in the office? A basic phone, maybe a BlackBerry, but now I can have a Google Android phone, a Apple iPhone, that all have these very rich functionality. The challenge for a business is, these are great because they're more feature rich, and it takes away cost. If employees buy this themselves, hey, I've not got to fund this resource, but now what I've got is a mixture of a personal user's device that's got their personal data and corporate data.
Right.
So we need to be able to kind of have a mixed model that says, what I need to do is allow you to use this, so I've got to recognize what it is, what the risk is, try and apply security controls that give some security around that device, that then segregate the business information from your personal information. So should somebody either leave the company or purposely try and take information away, or even just lose that phone, happens every day, I can remotely wipe what is corporate and confidential, but equally in many countries through data protection laws, I have to keep that separate. I can't touch the personal private data.
So that's the thing. This will also create new challenges for the industry. I would say, how do you overcome these obstacles?
Very simply, I think through smart security management. So, as I say, it's about being able to discover that device. And the first question is, do I support you using it? Should you be able to plug that into the network, or, simplest thing, forward corporate email out to that device? So I've got to recognize the problem. Then I have to come to some consensus with the users saying, the trade-off is, you can use your own device, but we need to have some level of security control. So does it have the right basic configuration settings? Do we need to put something on there? Then how do we ensure the corporate data stays safe? So they need to, from a business perspective, take some ownership and responsibility for keeping the business data safe, but keeping it away from controlling the user.
Yeah, sure. So what's your view on that?
Absolutely. I think what's important here is that IT defines that corporate policy and communicates that, so the user is not in for a surprise. As Greg said, it's very important to segregate what's corporate data, what's personal data, and then communicate that to the user so they understand that this is also corporate property that they need to be responsible for, albeit they use that as a personal phone as well. So defining that and then communicating that is, I think, quite important.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.